morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where in the world you are, and of course, what time of day or night it is either. Welcome to the podcast Up on the Edge with Al and Owen. I'm your host, Alan Nield, Big Al, or just Al, whatever you want to call me. And each week, I'm going to be joined by regular co-host Owen Sherratt and other special guests along the way too. Right, let's get right into it. This is the podcast Up on the Edge. How are you, mate?
This is all very complicated.
Hey, listen, that's the studio of a radio geek behind you.
Yeah, those carts on the wall at back there.
Where are we looking? What?
On the racks.
Oh, no, they're all CDs.
CDs. I don't know whether they look a bit like carts from here.
They did look like the carts that you used to pop
in the good old days.
The cart machine's been confined to the loft, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
That's as old as it gets in here.
Yeah. Oh, there used to be one of them under the stairs that they're revving from the right one.
Hey, you need to be really, really careful because Owen will be having an orgasm if you show him that for long enough.
Well, that's that one, gal.
Now I can't get my phone to stand up.
You're recording now, yeah. Sorry.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I've got all this. This is gold.
It's lost.
Fake. Oh no,
it's gone. Oh. Anyhow, those just joining us, you just miss Liam. He was a lovely fella. We saw his studio there, and he's gone.
Where's it gone? Hello?
It's what I'll be like when I get a proper camera.
I can still hear you, but I can't see anything anymore.
You've pressed the video button, that's why.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at my home screen on the phone now. How do I get back to you?
Well, you're with us. I think on your screen, on your monitor, I think you turn the video off.
Yeah, I think he's on his phone, isn't he? So
I'm on my phone.
Oh, right.
He told me not to use my laptop.
Did it?
No.
Al said don't use your laptop.
Did it?
Oh,
yeah, it's only because of the computer audio. He's not got a microphone plugged into it.
Right. Fair enough.
Okay, all right. Let me figure out how to do this then.
So I'm guessing there'll be like at the top leftish, there'll be a green.
There we go.
We're in.
I had to go back into my apps and click Zoom again.
Bingo.
Right, sorted.
There we
Good
go.
lad.
Right. That'll stay stood up.
It's a lovely picture, isn't
Yeah, it'd be right.
Anyhow, good evening, young man.
Marvellous.
Oh, you look very serious. I've never seen you look serious before. What's going on, man?
Let's close the door. There we are.
It's even got soundproofing on the walls, Al.
This is all quite exciting.
Yeah, but he's a proper radio geek. He is. He's the Liam is the nerd with the pointy head that set the revolution up.
Well, this used to be a home studio till I got rid of it and stopped using it. I've not used it in years, so now there's just bits of it left.
Yeah, so it's that room in the house that you.
In fact, I don't know if you can see from there because I can only see a TV picture, but the mixing desk stood on its end in the corner.
Yeah, I can see the balls.
Very nice.
That's
the balls on the wall as well.
That's the original Oldham FM mixing desk.
Just swing to one side a little bit. Let me have a nosy at that.
Which way? That
way?
Yeah, isn't it? Eh? It's a proper one, that, Al. Isn't it?
Is this the purpose of the call then? The room's more exciting than me.
What'll happen is you'll go out with somebody, you'll come back and everything will be missing.
Yeah.
So
you'll have a mysterious phone
there.
call saying, "Can you meet me in 10 minutes?"
Yeah.
And then while you were out, you know what I mean?
Yeah. The neighbours will just think the plumber's been.
How's Liam anyway?
Amazing, spectacular, wonderful, never better. Very poor.
Really?
Broke. Right? Yeah. Well, I'm living on fumes.
I was going to say because I mean. These days, you've been sort of out and about with your with the radio trucks and the stages and one thing and another, and I would suggest that this is probably amongst the busiest time of year for you normally, isn't it?
It would be, although none of them have turned up. Last time I worked was Pancake Day in March.
Really?
Wow. That long ago.
I got 5 outside broadcast trucks parked up.
Doing nothing?
Doing nothing. Well, the last time I drove one yesterday to bring it back from an MOT.
Yeah. That bad.
That's it, yeah. And everything's pulling for next year already. So Tour de Yorkshire, which is one of mine, next year, that's off. They've pulled that.
Right.
Everyone's making decisions now. about next year. And because Boris has kind of screwed Christmas up, all the event organisers are panicking now. They're all going, oh my God, it's going to be terrible next summer, so we're not going to do anything.
So
yeah, I know.
Shall we start at the start? Because I would suggest it was about 99, something like that. We had Oldham FM broadcasting from the
Spindles, wasn't it?
Spindle Shopping Centre.
It was before that,
Right,
because Revolution came on in 99.
right. So what's the story then? What's the history?
Julian Hotchkiss was doing Berry Sound. And I thought, I can't let him get away with this. So this was 93, 94-ish.
Right.
So we did a whole bunch of Oldham FM RSLs. I think we did 5 or 6, starting in about 95. We did like two a year for 3 or 4 years, or 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
And in between those, we did the Christmas radio stations, because at the time, the radio authority wouldn't let you do more than 2 RSLs a year.
Yeah, I remember them days.
So we used the studio, but changed the station name into a different, and took my name off it. So we did. So we teamed up with the Coliseum Theatre. So we did Aladdin FM, and there was another Christmas one, and so that didn't have my name on it, but it was me sat in the background, sort of making money for the studio, really, just keeping the thing ticking over.
Yeah.
Right. And so it took you, what, 5-6 years then to get the full license?
Yes.
Wow. And it was
So
lot of hoops to jump through for that?
Enormous. And lots of money.
Yeah.
It was, well, that's why I couldn't do it on my own. I would love to have done it on my own, but the license application processes are getting on for 50 grand.
Back then.
Back then, because of all the research you've got to do. I mean, the license application fee itself was a couple of grand or whatever it was. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Either here and there. But to stand any chance of winning, you had to have a media group on board, because the radio authority thought you were a bunch of jokers if you didn't have a media group on board. And you had to have like shed loads of research and all sorts of figures. So
yeah, I know it's changed a lot with the licensing, what have you, especially with all these community licenses that come up as well. Because I remember when they first come through, I was working at All FM in Longside, and we'd done a couple of RSLs there, and we were in the same. We were with Insure FM, and they were launched at the same time. And again, they had meetings in London. I was allowed to go to a few of them, which was nice. But again, like you say, they're jumping through hoops for that, and basically they were charities. So to get a full-time license, as well as that, your license, you've also got your fees got paid to the artists and things like that as well, haven't they?
Oh yeah, it was much more complicated than it is now, because back then you had a promise of performance. You had to be really specific about what format you were going to run, what music you were going to play. You were tied into how much speech content per hour you had to have. There was all of that, and there were ownership restrictions on how much individuals could own. So because the newspaper, the Chronicle, wanted to own more than they were allowed to, so they were restricted by the radio authority as to how much they could own at the radio station. But of course, all those rules are gone now.
Yeah, you can own as much as you want now, can't you?
Oh yeah.
You know, we've got power and
what was that all about then? Was that just a monopoly thing?
Yeah, it was to make sure that the existing radio stations didn't have any competition.
Right.
So I couldn't come on and bid for a license and say, I'm going to do contemporary chart hits and I'm going to do a top 40 format and play hits all day, because that's Key 103's territory and that's ring fence for them. Yeah. So you had to do loads of market analysis, which meant recording a month's worth of each radio station, analysing it all, putting it all into graph format, analysing where the market had gaps, and then coming up with a format that was flexible enough so that we could change it once we'd won it, but looked solid enough so that the radio authority would look at it and say, yeah, that fills a gap in the market.
Do you feel a massive sense of achievement for what you managed to achieve over a long period of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money in a long period of time.
Well, it was, you make it sound, more onerous than it was. It was just very slow because you're limited by the timetable of what was the radio authority, what it is now Ofcom. And they worked like any government organisation at a snail's pace.
Yeah.
So there was like a bit of activity and then a big gap of nothing. And then a bit of activity and then another enormous gap. Because of course first of all, you had to convince the radio authority that Oldham required a radio station. So that's one set of hurdles you've got to get over. So that's a load of research and a load of lobbying and a load of doing the RSLs to say, yeah, there is a market for here, and yes, it can generate the revenue. And then the radio authority go away and think about that for 2 years. And then they stick you on what was called the working list, which had 100 and something other towns on it. And gradually it gets down to your town, and then they advertise the radio station, and then everybody else jumps on the bandwagon and sticks an application in. I think we had about 8 for Oldham, if I remember rightly.
Really?
Yeah, they're probably all in the library now because as part of the application process, you had to print up some paper applications and put them in the local libraries for people to go and look at, and every applicant had to do that. So, I certainly know Key 103, whoever they were at the time. It wasn't trying to think who they were at the time.
Was it EMAP at the time?
EMAP, that's it. They put an application in. John Myers put an application in. There was me. So there's 3. But there were loads of them. I'm sure there were about 8 for Oldham.
It's quite a prominent area, though, isn't it? Because, I mean, it covers the same side, Oldham, like Alcos, east side of Manchester, Rochdale. But well, it's quite a big...
That was a separate argument, because initially it wasn't.
Right.
Initially it was what the way it was called a SALI, which stood for Small Scale Alternative Location Independent something.
Yeah.
And the license was for North and East Greater Manchester. So Tower FM were bidding at the same time as us.
Yeah.
And it was open to anyone from Wigan, Bolton, Rochdale, Oldham, Tameside down to Stockport, all that kind of northeast side of Manchester. And they had to convince the radio authority why their town should have a radio station. And initially there was only going to be one license.
Yeah.
For that whole area. And we all kicked up a fuss, and eventually the radio authority said, okay, well, we'll award 2 licenses. And it could have gone to anyone. It could have gone to Bury, or it could have gone to Bolton, it could have gone to Rochdale, it could have gone to Tameside, because there were loads of applicants for those. And it went to Tower FM in Bolton, and Revolution in Oldham, or Oldham FM Limited.
Do you not find it really frustrating that, the length of time that it took and the hoops that you've had to jump through, when effectively it's a business like any other, and if you wanted to set a business up today, you could do that in around about 10 minutes?
Absolutely, pissed me right off. But they've got you over a barrel. It's like I say, if I want to set up a corner shop, I find the premises, I stick my money in, and I take the risk, and off you go.
But the actual incorporation of the company is 10 minutes online now. That's it. Job done.
Yeah.
And it took the best part of 10 years.
Yeah, but don't you also have to have a business plan that's standing for 8 years as well? Because the licenses run for 8-year periods, don't they?
Yes. Yeah, we had to have an 8-year business plan, and it all had to be costed. So you had to have as you would probably put together a 1-year plan or a 3-year plan, that's costed down to the penny. We had to do that for 8 years.
Wow.
But I was all through the RSLs, I was a sole trader. It wasn't until the Oldham Chronicle got involved in the very last RSL that Oldham FM Limited came into being.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then after that one, of course, came 96.2 The Revolution.
Yes.
Which was trading under Oldham FM, I think, wasn't it? And you got the premises up on Oldham Edge.
Yes. Well, we didn't. The Chronicle did because my board wouldn't do it.
Right.
Because initially we weren't going to be there.
Right.
Initially, we were going to be in what is now an NHS doctor's surgery or walk-in centre down Ashton Road in Hathershaw, just before you get to Parkgate Bakeries.
All right.
When you go down that road,
Yeah.
you pass a mini Tesco on the left, and on the right-hand side there's like a stone barn building.
Yeah.
And we'd kind of committed to going in there. And it turned out at the last minute it was full of dry rot and wanted loads of work. So we pulled out of that. But then we were stuck with, well, we've got to go on air, but we've got nowhere to go on air from. So that's why it went on air from the spindles from the old studio that was still sat there.
Yeah.
While we got the new building ready, because that was when we saw, well, I saw that, and it was a burned out shell up on Oldham Edge. Used to be the Sarah Moore. Before that, it was Topper's Tavern.
Yeah.
And it was there with a burned out roof. And I went to my board and said, "This will be perfect. It'll be great. Just the right size for us. We can stick the aerial on the roof. We don't need to spend tons of money because it, not Arkiva, whoever they were at the time, who became Arkiva. They wanted like $8,000 a year to go on the mast across the field. So it was like, sod right off. We'll just stick the transmitter on the roof. Which didn't happen, by the way, but that was the idea.
Yeah.
But my board, which consisted of me, the Chamber of Commerce, UKRD, and the Oldham Chronicle, they wouldn't have it. They said, no, we're not putting that kind of money in to sort the building out.
No.
So then the Chronicle came to the rescue and said, right, well, we'll buy it off you. Not buy it off, we'll buy the building and rent it to you.
Yeah.
Because although it was burned out shell, all it needed was a roof, really.
Yeah.
Because the rest of it was only burned out, when it was burned out shell, it was only burned out on the top floor. What had happened is whoever was living in the flat at some point above had had a fire, and it had set fire to the flat and burned the top floor and burned the roof out. So the pub underneath it was still there. But of course that doesn't matter. None of that mattered because we're going to gut the place anyway.
Yeah.
So it was Oldham FM Limited that paid the 50-odd grand to put the studios in. So the Chronicle got a great deal there because they bought it for next to nothing. I mean, I forget what it was, but it wasn't much more than 100,000.
Yeah.
I think the roof cost about 35-40 grand.
Yeah, it's a massive building, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big building.
It's something like, I think, not including the flat, it's something like 6,500 square feet.
Yeah.
It's like roughly 3,000 square foot, 3,000 square foot per floor.
Yeah.
And then you got the flat upstairs. But it was great. It was on its own. It's got parking with it. You're not going to annoy the neighbours. It was fabulous. And of course, the Chronicle's got a tenant that's going to pay rent for the next at least 8 years.
Yeah. Guaranteed.
So
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it was all, you had all the security fencing all the way around, the electronic gate. So, well, it was all very high tech at the time, wasn't it? You just waltz up to a gate, flash your pass, and it just opened automatically for you.
Again, that was a contra that was done with groundwork.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Was there a lot of contras happened at the time then?
Not so many because we needed the money to start off with.
Yeah.
I think we contraed a couple of cars, and we contraed most of the landscape. We had to pay materials, so we had to pay for the fencing and the gate controls and things.
Yeah.
The groundwork labour, we contraed with them for adverts.
And then you sort of moved up to the revolution sort of came into being, and you've then got to sort of select who's going to go on air and who's going to be the presenters. What's that like? Because all of a sudden you've probably got every man and the dog in Manchester wanting to be your best friend. Well,
a lot of that's not down to me anyway, because I don't forget I've got UKRD looking over my shoulder.
Yeah.
Right.
So I had a guy, he's a lovely man actually, I had a guy called Terry Mann as kind of a consultant person who was the bridge between me and UKRD, who was working full-time with me for 6 months at the start of it, babysitting me to make sure I didn't do anything stupid. So.
And did you?
I'm sure I did, but he was really good actually, because I thought he was going to be a UKRD spy.
Yeah.
And he actually wasn't. He was absolutely completely up for it. And he was saying, right, what do you want to achieve? This is how we need to present it to UKRD to get it past your board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really, so I was limited in certain cases to stuff that I could get past UKRD without them thinking I'm a complete retard.
Right.
But other than that, it was fairly free reign. I mean, I was very careful right the way through the RSLs to say to people who were volunteering, because it was all volunteers at the RSLs,
Yeah.
nobody was paid. I was very careful to say, this doesn't guarantee you a job if we win the license. The way I phrased it with people volunteering was, you should look at this as an opportunity so you can get some experience, stick it on your CV, and it's a stepping stone for you to go on and do whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah.
And of course, some people went off and did that before I won the license. So people that I had in mind, like Gareth Evans and people who were eating breakfast on some of the RSLs, he'd already gone off and got all the jobs in radio. So most of what attracted people was I'd offer people 2-year contracts to start off with.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't compete with any of the other radio stations in terms of salary. I just couldn't do it. But what I could do was offer them a job security.
Yeah.
So I signed everyone up on 2-year contracts. So I said, well, if I get fired in 6 months, the worst that can happen is that they fire you off for 6 months, but they've got to pay you for 2 years.
It's not bad, is it?
And did it work?
It did. And then, but I got, I don't know if you remember Caroline Martin.
Yeah.
Who was quite a big name at the time and very good. I got her like that. But of course she didn't stay very long because she got a much better offer down south.
Yeah.
And she was with me about 6 months and then sold it off. But it worked with Wayne. I got Wayne Dutton from Piccadilly from Key 103. He came because of that. Because
the most famous man in radio, isn't he?
Yeah, well, he'd done about 14 years at Piccadilly and then at 1152.
Yeah, I remember him. He just did loads of cover, didn't he? Over there.
Well, he's done loads of stuff. He's done every time slot, and he had an evening show for years and years and years. He's one of those people that slips under the radar, but he's just really amazing and really good at what he does.
Yeah.
A funny story for you about Wayne Dutton, in fairness. Wayne was... I got into radio. I sort of got befriended by Lee Glasby, and I was doing bits and bats on the evening show with Lee, just sort of turning in. Don't ask me why. And then Lee got the breakfast show with me. So it was Lee Glasby at breakfast with Big Al. And one particular morning, Lee couldn't get in for whatever reason, sick kid or whatever it was. So whoever it was that was the station manager at the time turned around and said, "Oh, you're going to have to do breakfast." Now, I'd never sat behind a desk before. I'd never broadcasted on my own before. So it was absolutely a baptism of fire. And so I think it was 6 until 10, the breakfast show. And about half an hour before I finished, Wayne Dutton waltzes into the studio and sits in the blue chair. Do you remember the blue chairs that we used to have in the... Yeah, right. So Wayne sits in one of the chairs just to sort of comfort me, make sure everything was all right.
They were a contra.
You were a contra. I can believe
you were comfy.
And so I gets right to the end of the show with Wayne sort of talking me through it and kicks the news in. News girl starts talking. I turn around to Wayne Dutton and I went, "Well, thank fuck that's over." And Wayne's going, "The mic's still on." And I've left the mic on. So, yeah, bless his cotton socks. He
happens to the best of us, Al. Don't feel bad.
Wayne Dutton is entirely responsible for my entire career.
Really?
Is it?
Well, yeah, because I started off at Hospital Radio at the same Hospital Radio as him.
Yeah.
And he got overnights on Piccadilly Radio. And I pleaded with him to go in so I could answer the phones and anorak about.
Yeah.
And while I was in there at Piccadilly, I'd been there for quite a while. We're talking a few months down the road of going in every night and unpaid to answer his phones, just to kind of be there. But it gave me access to the studios. So a couple of times a week, I'd record a demo for Mike Briscoe, who was the program controller at the time.
Yeah.
And I'd sneak into his office and leave the tape on his desk. And I did this week in, week out for weeks and weeks and weeks until he phoned me up and said, "You're going to keep doing this, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Right, well, you better come and have a chat then." And that's how I got onto Piccadilly. If Wayne hadn't let me in to answer the phones, I wouldn't have got anywhere.
Was radio something that you always wanted to do then? And
oh yeah, always from being 12 years old.
Why?
No idea. Well, originally I wanted to do telly.
Right.
See, I was the other way around, and then when I got to do a bit of TV as a teenager, didn't like it.
Well, that's what happened with me. Without boring you to tears, very briefly, I always wanted to do telly. I got an apprenticeship at Granada. I did my apprenticeship at Granada, and then after that, they gave me a job as an editor. Not an editorial editor, as a videotape editor.
Yeah.
So I got to sit in a room about the size of this bedroom with people smoking and a coffee machine going in the background and a load of tape machines and the director shouting at me all the time. Yeah. Until I became anemic because, of course, you don't see any sunlight because you're in a closed room with no daylight for 12 hours a day. And after about 6 months of that, I thought, I can't do this the rest of my life. This is just awful. Because the rest of my Granada experience was lovely. When I was doing the apprenticeship, that was brilliant. Because you did a bit of floor managing, a bit of camera, a bit of sound, a bit in the newsroom. It moved you all around the building to learn a bit of everything.
You got a taste of everything then.
That's right. But the job that I got was just horrific. So that's when I went to AA Roadwatch to do travel, because I'd been doing hospital radio alongside this. Again, I've always done hospital radio since I was like 16. So, yeah, I wanted to do telly and then decided telly wasn't for me.
So when it comes to radio presenters, is Ivan Brackenbury the best radio presenter you've ever come across?
Oh, I'd have him on straight away.
He is genius, isn't he? And he does epitomise a lot of the presenters that I've worked with over the years.
Him and John Shuttleworth.
Really?
Absolutely.
Never seen John Shuttleworth, so I wouldn't know.
You see, to me, and I don't understand why people find radio so complicated and radio so difficult. Yeah. Because essentially, to me, well, local commercial radio we're talking about here, rather than the niche market stuff. But you know, I don't care where it is. I don't care whether you're in Salisbury or Cambridge or Oldham or wherever. You know, it could be in Newcastle. Essentially, if you're in your typical market town, all you've got to do is play ABBA and talk about pies.
Hey, but there's some nice pies out there, isn't there, to be fair?
Yeah, well, absolutely. You know, I'm convinced there's, I mean, obviously that's oversimplifying it just a little bit, but not by much. I really don't think it's that complicated. And people make it very complicated. I remember at UKRD, I had to go to monthly managing directors meetings. They had this great idea where everyone from every radio station in the group would meet up once a month. Yeah. And they got some consultants in from Australia to tell us how to make great radio. And they came in with all the, you know, the music testing and the charts, and this is how to say it, this is what you should say, this is what you shouldn't say. And it was all a load of nonsense. And it turned out to be nonsense eventually, because they gave us stereo about 4 or 5 months and then gave them the heave-ho.
Do you miss doing live radio then?
Very much so, but there's no money in it.
No, there hasn't been for many years.
As I can attest from the fee I'm getting for this.
Yeah.
You're getting paid? Still waiting for a quarter of midget gems from the first one.
Yeah. Well, we'll split the fees that I've laid out up to now, and then we'll dish the rest between us.
Yeah, no problem.
And that, you know, that in a nutshell, that's the problem. I would love to do live radio, even if it was streaming or doing whatever. But the problem is, the numbers just don't stack up anymore. I can get a prime example. I'll give you a prime example. My daughter is 17, and my son is 20. And I asked them both, my son's back from university at the moment, he's doing physics at Hull. I asked them both just the other day what they've been listening to, and they don't listen to any radio at all. No broadcast radio. They listen to Spotify or they watch stuff on YouTube.
Yeah. I've got kids like that. My twins are like that. Yeah.
I think most kids are like that because it's,
TikTok, that's the one at the moment.
TikTok.
It is.
We're going to do a dance now.
TikTok's great.
Oh, it drives me insane because they will sit at opposite ends of the room, the living room, texting each other.
Yeah.
Now, why they don't talk to each other, I don't know. But then they'll be like, well, what are you texting her for when she's there? Well, I was just texting her to show her this video that I'm watching. You know, it's like the art of communication has gone. At least radio allowed you to talk. And one of the things that I was always told was, you know, you're very privileged to have these people tune in and have a conversation with you, because when you're talking to people, I was always taught to speak not to an audience but to one person.
Absolutely spot on. I was always taught that. The other thing Mike Briscoe, God rest his soul, taught me, which was amazing, was if I'm about to open the microphone, I should consider that the song I've just played, that might have been Elton John or whatever, has cost X million pounds to produce and sold out 1 million copies. And I might be going into something else that's had the same amount of money spent on it. If I can improve on what they've done, by all means, open the microphone and say something. But if I can't, keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
I just play the next song.
I was told that if you've got nothing to say nothing.
Right, Lord Penk, of all his misgivings, one thing and another, right, Lord Penk turned round to me and said, I've been watching you. All right, thanks, Steve. He says, do you know what you do before you put the microphone live? I went, I ain't got a clue. He says, you cough, you clear your throat, then you smile, and then you put the microphone up. And that makes a difference. And I had no idea I did it. Apparently, I smile before I start talking.
That's good.
It's
good to be smiling when you're talking. You can tell.
Your voice. Yeah, I get it now. I didn't at the time.
I've got an amazing Steve Penk story.
Tell me, because we're going to get Steve on. He's avoiding us at the minute, Steve, but he will be on here.
I've known Steve for years and years and years because, of course, he was at Piccadilly Radio when I was there.
Yeah.
So we go back a long, long way. But this is a revolution topic, you know, because of the podcast. I really just call it Steve Penk story. After I'd left, sometime after, they hired me to do Rochdale Christmas Lights with a big truck.
Yeah.
And it was when John Evington was looking after the place. John Evington's my hero. When Owen Oyston bought Piccadilly Radio and it all went completely mad, John Evington gave me a job at Signal. So he's another one of the people that rescued my career.
Yeah. John Evington, to me, is one of the most frustrating characters in the world, because I could have some fantastic conversations with John. And he could put a droplet of common sense in your brain when there was nothing there.
Yeah.
And he was really, really good at that. And then he'd do something this big that would piss you off so much it was ridiculous. And he never fired me. He let me go. He never fired me.
We'll let you go now, Al. But yeah, no.
I've been fired by John Evington on several occasions.
Have you really?
Well, I'll tell you the revolution story first. Then
Tell us the Steve story.
Right, okay, the Steve Penk story. Rochdale Christmas Lights. I turned up and John Evington's producing. And the branding for the truck was if you've never seen the outside broadcast truck, it's got great big side panels and a big center panel that you brand for whatever radio station you're working with. And instead of the radio station name, it was a massive picture of Steve Penk's head.
Do you not remember I hosted it?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying, because you were there, yeah. It was a massive picture. So imagine the truck with big side panels with a massive picture of Steve Penk's head.
He had a green T-shirt on, didn't he?
Penk, yeah. And then it says Steve Penk in big letters, and then at the bottom, in small letters that you can't see more than 4 or 5 rows back, it says Revolution.
Yeah.
So I would set the thing up, put the branding in. I say to John Evington, "You're not serious, are you? This hilarious. Steve Penk's going to eat this up. He'll love it." And I said to Stuart, so what time's Steve Penk arriving? And John Hamilton said, he's not coming.
Yeah. Oh, and it's true.
No. Well, I don't remember Steve ever doing anything like that.
No, well, so Al had to go on stage in front of an audience that have been looking at a massive Steve Penks head all through the warm-up, and to host the show without referring to the fact that Steve Penk's not actually going to turn up.
Yeah, another one of the bright ideas that came out of Mr. Evington. But no, I mean, in fairness, Steve was a massive. It was a massive name.
A big pull, wasn't it?
Yeah, and a big pull. And a lot of people tuned in to the Revolution at the time because it was Steve, and you can't take that away from him. God, everyone's gone quiet. You can't take it away.
No, you can't. No, he's definitely Steve. Yeah, it's no one else. But I mean, I really enjoyed working for him, to be fair. And like I say, when he was at the station there, when I was doing the nights, he'd always come in and say hello, and they'd go, "You don't mind turning the speakers off, do you?"
Yeah.
Well, I don't have them on anyway. I've got my headphones on. So, but yeah, no, but it was weird because it used to go mad when people took the blinds down, and all the old school presenters used to sort of shut themselves into these studios, didn't they?
Yeah.
Didn't like the world looking in.
Yeah, but Phil Wood was like that. Steve was like that.
I think Brendan was like that as well, wasn't it?
Stanage was like that. Brendan was a bit like that. Yeah, he was. Yeah. So what? A lot of misdemeanors going on up at that Sarah Moore Studios, Liam. What wicked tales of war can you tell us?
I've got no knowledge of any of those.
That's bullshit.
Liam, did you ever come across the ghost?
No, I didn't. No, one or two people said they have, but I never did.
What's the story behind that then?
I've no idea. I don't know.
Well, I was told that the ghost is, because years ago, the Sarah Moore was the woman that had the house, and it was a place for estranged boys, apparently. That's how it goes anyway. And
Estranged boys or strange boys?
Probably a bit of both, Alan. You know what it's like up there. And the thing is, he sees, I remember being in the studio one night, and in the main studio, you had, and I wasn't sure whether it was a light on the glass or something, but as I looked up, I saw something just move in front of me, like a figure. And then as I looked up, I seen it go into the wall towards Studio 2. And I thought, I'm not saying anything to anybody at all. But there's a proper squeaky ass on it.
Yeah.
And it was only, I think it was Jill, who's standing doing the news. It was her that was saying, jokingly, have you seen the ghost yet? I went, well, funny you should mention that. And one of the evenings I was on, a friend of mine who used to do ghost hunting with, Phil, he come in and he got some really good readings upstairs in the bar area. So
now, I wouldn't say I've seen a ghost or anything like that because I'm not a great believer. However, I used to get, when I was doing the evening shows there, some real spooky feelings.
Yeah.
To the extent that if I was in the building on my own, I would always leave the studio door open so I could see the stairs and the green room and one thing and another. And it's, and I'm one of those that's like, a lot of hocus pocus, not interested. But when you're in the middle of it, it's a really strange situation. I mean, it's bad enough being in, we were blessed at the Revolution. And I've got to thank you for this, Liam, because the studio sizes at the Revolution were fabulous. Because normally studios are just pokey holes. I've been in them that are literally the size of cupboards. But the Revs were brilliant. But, to sit in the cellar, effectively, of a pub, that's been converted, very well converted, I would say, it just sometimes just sent chills down your spine. And when you're trying to broadcast, it's very off-putting, to say the least. So, but you've never experienced anything.
No, Joyce is who you want to speak to, is it, Joyce? The queen?
Yeah, Joyce. Yeah,
she's still
Joyce.
there.
She's been there longer than any of us.
Yeah.
And Mark Alston, I think, is another ghost experience person. I think he's seen it.
Right. Yeah. He said a lot of things, Mark Alston, though, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Sorry.
Did you not like him, Al? What's he ever done to
No,
you?
he's not that I don't like him at all, no. It's not the case. He's just experienced a lot of things.
Has it? I'll have to get him on then and find out what.
Yeah.
So would you get back into radio again then, Liam, or?
Yeah, I would love to, but I can't afford it. Well, I still do radio now.
Yeah.
Except Bowers, of course, bought everything.
Yeah, Bauer and Global, yeah.
Yeah, Bauer and Global, between them, have bought practically everything. I've got a couple of outside broadcast buses that go out to the BBC. And the rest of the trucks, most of what I do up until Bauer bought everything there was still a lot of radio involved. It was all mostly UKID stuff.
Yeah.
But now I'll carry on doing those, just not as radio, but just as the events, because that's the tragedy of it.
Yeah.
You know, things like York Christmas Lights, which is one of mine, Brighouse Christmas Markets is one of mine, Goldwing Parade in Scarborough. There's a lot of big events. Those events are still going to happen, but Global and Bauer are just not interested.
No.
Wow.
So that's a shame, isn't it? Especially considering that the stations they buy them are local stations.
Well, not
but they
anymore.
No, far from it. And I think it's hard to say, but I think it's going to be sort of the death of radio.
I think it'll come back. Well, first of all, people misunderstand, because if I was Bauer, I'd be doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's business at the end of the day.
Absolutely, because their business model is get rid of local sales, we don't need it. Get rid of all the studios because we don't need them. Don't need all the sales cars. We can cut the costs by 3/4. And we can just rely on national sales and we'll be quids in, which they will be, which is great. But the only reason they can do that is because Ofcom have let them.
Yeah.
Most of this is down to Ofcom. Because they've allowed what should be local standalone licenses to be mocked up and just broadcast network stuff. Ofcom could have easily stopped all of that by just saying, no, you can't take network for more than however many hours a night.
I suppose it's the consequences and the joys of accountants running businesses these days, isn't it? You know, they are number jugglers.
Well, I think it's a fairly short-term proposition anyway, because once Ofcom get round to licensing all these small-scale DAB multiplexes around the country, you'll end up with lots of local radio again. And they'll all be competing against Bauer and Global. And I don't think that the business model for Bauer and Global will stack up in 10 years' time.
Yeah, I understand that as well, because, you know, they're going to be sort of, from on a corporate point of view, touting for two totally different businesses. You know, you're going to have your local businesses dealing with your local radio, and you're going to have your national businesses dealing with your global, your Bowers. From a music point of view, great music is great music. So as long as you've got, and this is just an opinion, but as long as you've got a radio station with good local presenters and great music, it's going to be a hit and it's going to work.
You'd like to think so, wouldn't you, Al?
Well, it's local radio for local people, and I think that was what made the revolution so successful and you know outlasted a lot of the other local radio stations. I mean, it was one of the last totally independent radio stations, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, you could. I think you could count them on one hand, couldn't you? The number of actual single-owned independent radio stations. I look at it more commercially than that, though. The way I look at it is from an advertiser's point of view. Without local radio, let's take someone like Flamingo Land in Yorkshire. Mm-hmm. They're a big spender, so they're not the local chippy. They're the kind of people that'll be spending $2 or $3 grand a month on local radio. Yeah. They've got nowhere to go now.
No, they're not going to be spending it with Bauer, who's going to be broadcasting it down in London, because it's of no use to them.
No,
no, and even if they buy, because you can buy onto particular transmitters.
Yeah.
Even if you do, it's still too wide an area for them, because Bauer are not they're not doing split breaks across all the individual transmitters. You can only buy regions. So for Flamingo Man to go on Bauer now, they used to go on Minster FM or Yorkshire Coast or even the one in Harrogate. But now they've got to buy Yorkshire and Lincolnshire, which is,
Right.
and that's everything from Leeds right the way down to Lincoln, right the way up to Tyne and Wear. And it's too expensive for them. They won't get the return. And there's all sorts of, there's the whole gamut of these big spending local advertisers that have got nowhere to go now.
So I suppose the question is, you know, what's going to be the timescales for this turnaround? When are you going to be putting your money where your mouth is? And would you be needing a ginger love child of Ken Barlow and a big lad from Oldham to do your breakfast show?
I'm going to sod off. I'm going to sod off somewhere warm and dry imminently. And in fact, I was considering, with all this COVID thing, I was considering throwing in the towel now. And thinking, you know what, I'll just sell up and sod off.
Well, if you go somewhere warm and dry and set a station up, have you considered having somebody who can't stand the sun too long because he burns lower crisp, and someone that's got nowhere has got to wear a sun hat, but does draw his eyebrows on?
I can do it from here for you. It's fine. It's not a problem. I'll just dial in. Yeah, that's what everyone else does. Liam, listen, it's been fantastic talking to you. Our time, unfortunately, is absolutely out.
It's flown by that
already,
hasn't it? Oh man,
Okay.
Do you know what? We should have extended it by another half an hour, or maybe we should do round two because there's so much more I need to talk about. It's ridiculous.
If they do round two, he's up for coming back.
Aye.
Liam,
Anytime.
bless your
Anytime.
cotton socks. Thank you very much indeed. Revolution, thank you.